So, with an educational session entitled The 10 P's of Public Speaking, would you please give a warm welcome to Mr. Simon Day? Go, Simon.
Thank you very much, Julian, for that introduction, and thank you everybody for the opportunity to be here this evening. I was saying to Julian in the introduction that when you're working in secondary education, and certainly in the time we're in at the moment, you get up early, go to work, come home, do a bit more work, go to bed, and then do it again the next day. And the last few weeks there hasn't been an awful lot to look forward to, but I've looked forward to tonight. So thank you for the privilege of being able to come and join with you for this session. Give me a wave, you can see the slides. Everybody's got them to view? Good, excellent, nice to know. We're going to try and incorporate a few of the learning styles mentioned tonight. So there will be a few instances for those of you who are fans of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, fastest finger first. So if you've got your chat box ready, you might have to type in a few answers or a few opinions. And it'll be nice to just have a brief discussion of some of those during the session. But I want to begin by posing you a question. And it's one that I want you to have a think about. And yeah, if you want to type an answer, welcome to type an answer. But if you'd like to speak, we've got time for a couple of people to share their thoughts on it. So the first question I want to pose to you is, in which area of public speaking are you most eager to improve? What's that one area that you feel holds you back? One area that you feel like you've always had that little struggle or that little niggle and you want to get better at? If you want to type an answer for me in the box, that would be terrific. If you'd rather just give me a wave and then have a chat with me about it, then you're also welcome to do so. I'll give you a couple of minutes on that one. All right, so we've got speaking off the cuff from Shah. Yeah, improvisation reaction, nerves around drying up and keeping calm before the main events. We've got a few contributions there. Excellent. Practicing slowing down. Okay. Well, we're going to cover some of these this evening, so this is really helpful. Amazing. All right, good to know. Well, thank you for being so honest and candid with that. What I want to do this evening is I want to go through 10 principles of public speaking and communication that all begin with P. So we call these the 10 Ps. And hopefully at least one of them, if not more, will appeal to those things that you've just mentioned. The first of them is preparation. Somebody complete the phrase for me, give me a shout. Fail to prepare.
Prepare to fail.
Yeah, there we go, wonderful. Usually spoken in an incredibly patronising tone by somebody that thought they knew your best interests and wanted to tell you it at precisely the time you didn't want to hear it. And the reason you didn't want to hear it was because you were nursing a bruised ego because you hadn't prepared and you'd suffered the consequences of not preparing and suffered some kind of embarrassment as a consequence. I remember getting this phrase from my mum after an A-level politics exam that I completely fluffed because I hadn't done the reading that I should have done. And my mum decided to tell me, fail to prepare, prepare to fail. But it was when I'd already got the U, so it didn't really help. And the reason why we struggle with that so much is because we sometimes have conflicting demands and we think, I've got so much to get done, but I've got to prepare this, this, and this. And you're trying to prioritize and balance. But I decided to take some time this weekend to really think about what I wanted to share this evening and how I wanted to present it. And the thing about public speaking and communication is when you have an opportunity to speak to an audience, they have placed their faith and their confidence and their trust in you that you're going to share something of value. And the way that you repay that faith and that trust is by having the respect to prepare properly. But then there's a problem. And the problem is, how many of you, by raise of hand, have experienced this when you've prepared a presentation? You've got something to deliver and you're preparing it, and you are hit by feelings of negativity about yourself, about your message, about your capability. How many of you have had that experience before? You prepare something and you think, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm good enough. I don't know if they're going to get anything out of it. Yeah, quite a few of us, absolutely. And the trouble that you get with that is sometimes the toughest audience is not the one you face on the day. Sometimes the toughest audience is the one you face in your mind before you ever get to the day. And if you can conquer that audience and you can convince that audience that you're worth it and that you've got the capability and the message is important, then you are on the right track. And actually the rest of it might be fine. I had an opportunity this weekend to coach a good friend of mine, somebody I've known for a few years, in preparing for a TEDx talk in Boston. And his message was phenomenal, all about how to get the most out of life through service and happiness. And I watched him during the filming process wrestle with himself, and to a point where really negative thoughts he was having, and he was saying, I don't know if I can do this, I'm getting it wrong, that word was in the wrong place, I couldn't get that delivery right. And we just had to take a break and say, look, what is this message about? What are you trying to achieve? And his perfectionism was crippling. And so if you're facing those feelings of imposter syndrome or perfectionism or self-doubt, you're not on your own, but they are part of the preparation process. And rather than seeing them as a limiting factor, I'd encourage you in future to see them as welcome opposition, something that is trying to stand in the way of you delivering an important message, but something that you can conquer. And if you take that view of it, then it might just start to improve your mindset going into the experience. We're all going to face opposition at one time or another, especially when we're trying to do good in the world. So take it as it comes, but know that you are not on your own, and you've got people on your side who want you to succeed. And quite often, that is your audience that you get on the day. They do want you to do well. It's sometimes your own thoughts that get in the way. So preparation, do your best, but accept you're not perfect, and accept that if you wrestle with those negative thoughts, you're not on your own, but you can beat them. The second P is punctuality. And this is an interesting one. I put this in here after some experiences that I've had around punctuality. There's a lot of goodwill lost in presentations by either starting late or finishing late. I've got to be honest here and say to you that I have never taken anything from a presentation during the time after it was meant to finish and the time it actually finished. Because as soon as you get to the time that a presentation is meant to finish, you're making meal plans, you're thinking about what you're going to do in the evening, you're thinking about your shopping, you're thinking about people you need to go and talk to, and everything else. You switch off. And it's about trying to get that balance between, yes, I've got a message of importance and I need to share it, but maybe I've got less time than I first predicted. I have to adapt my message somewhat. And it's always better to curb your presentation slightly and finish at the right time than try and teach something of importance with time that was never yours to take in the first place. And that's something I've learned from presentations that I've sat in and presentations that I've delivered. You can see an audience flag even 5 minutes before your allotted finish time. You take it 5-10 minutes after and you've lost them. You've completely lost them. So sometimes that's a skill that takes practice to adapt and to curtail and to fit into the time and be flexible if other things take place. But it is a vital thing to do. So on that, I've got a question for you. And again, this is fastest finger first. So get into your chat box and we'll see who gets the first answer of the evening. Question is, you've prepared a 25-minute presentation. The host comes up and tells you that in order to get everyone out on time for lunch, you now only have 15 minutes. What do you do? You've now got 4 options. A, storm out of the room and refuse to deliver your presentation because you've prepared and it's a mark of disrespect. B, deliver a 10-minute condensed version of your talk and explain that due to the day not running smoothly, the audience are only getting a whistle-stop tour. C, deliver exactly 15 minutes as instructed and explain you'll be around during lunch to answer any questions. There will be networking opportunities. Or D, deliver 20 minutes. It's still 5 minutes shorter than you planned and it's only 5 minutes over into lunch. Cast your votes, A, B, C or D. Please do so now. Who's got in with the answer? Let's see. Chat box. Oh, lots of C's. Definitely A from Julie.
I'm off.
Oh, it looked like Marcus got in there first with C, so very well done. Good job, everyone. All right, perfect. So confident on that one. There's a few more questions this evening, so there will be more to keep fingers ready to contribute. On to number 3 now, posture. I picked this picture because it reminds me of those days when I was a young kid, trying to learn how to play the piano and failing miserably. When my mother had a chicken. I don't know even where you got these egg timers from. The chicken-shaped egg timer that you had to wind to half an hour, and it ticked down with a really annoying ticking noise that was so loud that I didn't even want to practice because I couldn't play the notes. And then it rang so loudly at the end, it scared me for life. So I wasn't keen on the piano when I was initially practicing. But posture, just like in music, my piano teacher used to encourage me to have good posture. Sit up straight, arms out, wrists up so you could hit the right notes. And I think that taught me early on that the physical position of your body makes for an easier time when you're performing a task. And public speaking is exactly the same. The better you can stand and position your body on the stage as a speaker, it does a number of things. If you fold your arms and cross up and shrink in and become defensive, one, it loses your credibility with your audience, but two, it actually impacts on the quality of your speaking voice. And there were a number of things that I was taught early on in my speaking journey to help me improve the quality of my voice, because I used to stand in quite a closed off position and I used to fold my arms, and that used to crush any quality of voice that I could have. There were two things that I was taught, and this helped me as a runner as well. And again, getting the right body position as a runner is very important, but there's always that exercise about the string, about pulling your head up and pulling those shoulders slightly back and opening out the chest area. And that helps your breathing as a runner, but it also helps your breathing as a speaker, because your voice will only ever be as strong and as resonant and as easy to listen to as the platform that you build for it. And your body is the platform that you position your voice on. So if you're standing up straight and you've got the string pulling you upwards and you've got those shoulders back, the chest cavity and your diaphragm and all the intercostal muscles can work more effectively to create you a more effective speaking voice. The trouble with it is, if you do get nervous or you do fear about drying up and you do become apprehensive, then that can very quickly counter the effects of a good voice. The other one that I was taught about that really helped me was hands, because hands are really blooming awkward things when you're trying to give a good presentation. And the hands are the key giveaway of a nervous speaker. I once watched somebody tuck their shirt in for 20 minutes while they were giving a presentation. And I was sat at the back, but I wanted to shout down to the front. I was like, it's tucked in, just leave it. You see all kinds of nervous habits with hands, and it's dreadful. But the one that taught me something was trying to imagine that you're holding two heavy shopping bags. And when you go back to neutral position in between points, you go back to holding those heavy shopping bags, and just resting the arms naturally by the sides is really awkward, because you want to put them in the pockets, or you want to put them behind your back, or fold them in front. And getting the hands right was a difficult one. But as well as it helping you to not look nervous, it also helps to improve your body position and improve the quality of your speaking. So posture is absolutely vital for effective speaking, as well as a number of other things and disciplines that you might need a good body position for. So posture, very important. We now move on to P number 4, which is projection, not to be mistaken with volume. Now, you can go to a football match on a day, and I know Marcus likes to go to his Norwich football matches, and especially probably when they beat Manchester City, this was a particular one that you went for. You can scream and shout and jump up and down, and you can rip your vocal cords in half if you're not careful. You can make a very loud noise, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's controlled. All professional singers and actors and people that have disciplines where their voice is required do warm-up exercises and breathing exercises. And this is important for two reasons. One, it preserves the quality and longevity of your voice. But two, it also means that your breathing becomes more efficient. You take in more oxygen, you calm your nerves, and also, because you're expanding the chest area and the diaphragm, that means that you get a better quality speaking voice, and you can sustain that voice for longer. So there are two brief ones that I use before I give presentations, partly to calm my nerves, but also to warm up my voice. And I want to share these with you now briefly, because if you're not used to them and you are doing a lot of speaking and presenting, they will be very useful to you. So there's two. The first one is to place your hand just underneath your ribs in the center of your chest in this area here. And the idea for this one is that you simply want to try and force your hand away from your body as far as possible and take in as much air to maximum capacity. And it's quite a forceful outward movement, and you do it 6 times. And what you'll find is that each of the 6 times, you'll find that you can take in a little bit more air. In the same way that you're stretching a muscle like a hamstring, you're stretching the intercostal muscles and the diaphragm and creating that additional space for more air to be regulated. So if you put the hand here, and you're going to breathe in through your nose, and you're going to take in as much air as possible and force that hand away. And we're going to do it 6 times. So get the hand ready, clear your lungs, breathe out, and through the nose, you're going to force as much air in as you can. You ready? Number 1. And now. 2. 3. Force that hand away. 4, 5, and 6. Does anybody now feel slightly lightheaded?
Yes.
Yeah. Reason for that is you've just taken in more oxygen in those 6 breaths than you've probably taken in all day. Because generally speaking, you breathe quite shallow. When you're not thinking about your breathing, you don't take in a lot. You breathe in and out, and it's fine. But when you're consciously breathing, you're forcing as much air as you can into your lungs. You're taking in naturally a lot more oxygen, which gets to your brain and gets everything working and the circulation going. The second exercise I do, and it's very similar, is again a more gradual process. And what we do is we breathe in for 5 and we breathe out for 7. So you're taking in as much air as you can to that point in 5, but then you breathe out for 7, and you get to that point where you've let all your breath out and you push out that little bit further. And again, like stretching a muscle or a rubber band, you're increasing the range of movement that you've got here within this diaphragm. So again, just try a couple of these. I'd do 6, but just try 2 or 3. You again put your hand here, and this is a slower breath. It's not to force, it's just to take you up to 5 maximum capacity and out for 7. So we breathe in for 5 and out for 7. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and in. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. One more in. And out for 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Very good for managing nerves and stress because the counting regulates the breathing. But did you know that people that sing in choirs live longer? Because when you are in a discipline that involves regulating oxygen intake on a regular basis and controlling breathing, over a longer period of time, you get better at using oxygen. And there's research to suggest that singing in a choir helps you live longer. And there's also a trend that suggests it helps combat things like dementia because of the oxygen to the brain over a longer period of time and better circulation. So using those breathing techniques allows you to have more space in the diaphragm, better quality and resonance to your voice, sustaining sentences all the way through to the end, and helps combat nerves as well. So projection and using that diaphragm and oxygen, massively important. Now, before we move on, another question. Ready? Fastest finger first. A helpful exercise is if you breathe. A, B, C, or D. Cast your vote now. What are you going for? Let's see who has the fastest finger on this one. I'll give you another 5 seconds or so, and then I'll check. Having to exit my presentation again. All right, let's see. Chat box, where have you gone? There we go. Who was first on the B? Oh, Marcus again. He's on form. Look at this. 2 for 2.
Yeah.
Lots of Bs though. Excellent. Kinesthetic, you see. We're all competitive and we're all engaged. Really good. Well done. All right, moving on. Next of the 10 Ps is as follows. Positioning. Now, this isn't so much to do with body position as it is to do with your position within the space and the room or the stage that you're operating on. There are a number of things that you can do on a stage. The most popular one that I see people use is the timeline, past, present, future. You move from one side of the stage to the other to talk about something that happened, something that's happening now, and something that happens in the future. It's a 3-part, and it works quite well. But there are other ways that you can use this stage to your effect when you're communicating. I saw a really effective one at the Professional Speaking Association a while ago where there was a keynote speaker and he was telling a story involving characters and there were subplots. And he took us to one part of the stage to introduce us to one character. And he stood there and delivered the story and said, right, I'm going to leave that character there while I come over here and tell you about this thing and this person. And then he'd deliver a whole other section of the speech from there. And then he'd say, right, we've forgotten about this person over here. And he'd go back over to where he told the story at first. And he'd talk about the other character again. And he built narratives and subplots on the stage by leaving places and people in different positions. And it was almost like he was setting a scene, like you have scenery in the background of a performance or a pantomime. But he was doing it with his voice and with his actions and his movement. And I thought it was just compelling and profound. And I'd never seen anything done like that before. I also have used positioning to great effect as a teacher within the classroom. If you've got low-level disruption or anything in a classroom that needs your attention, rather than shouting at the kid from one side of the room and saying, look, put your pen down, gradually walking over towards the child and just migrating in that direction. The kid often notices before you get there that you're coming their way, and they notice they've still got a pen in their hand and they're tapping it on the desk. And sometimes you don't even need to get to the desk before the kid puts the pen down because they can see you coming. Or the other thing that they'll do is they'll notice that you're coming and you'll stand by them. And sometimes what you can just do is very gently just put a hand on the desk. You don't need to say put your pen down, you just put your hand on the desk next to them and they recognize that they're asking you to put the pen down. It's very subtle, but with students, proximity works amazingly well. And I've noticed this alarmingly in contrast during COVID, because now working in high school, I have a taped off area, a box at the front of my classroom where my computer is and my desk is, and I can't leave that box. So I go into my classroom and I stand and deliver the entire lesson from a corner of the room. So I can't get round and talk to my students. I can't get round and use proximity. I can't go and check in on them. I can't mark their work. And it's killing me because that was 90% of my teaching, was getting in there and saying, how's it going? What can I do for you? Can you just make sure that's down? Or just using proximity to challenge that low level disruption in classrooms. And I've seen it work both ways. And I recognize now that proximity, whether it's to instill discipline, whether it's for storytelling, like you want to tell someone a secret during a speech, you can move closer. Whether it's that you want to build intimacy or trust with your audience, moving around the stage and using that proximity is invaluable. Think about presentations that you deliver. Is there something really important that people need to be aware of? Is there a secret or a special story or anecdote you want to tell them to build that connection? Think about, rather than standing back or standing center stage, moving off to one side and bringing in a particular part of the audience or beckoning them in and telling them a secret. Whatever it is that you're doing with positioning can be really powerful as much as with your voice, just by where you stand. So think about positioning on the stage. Can you use it to better effect when you're giving your presentations? The next of the P's is pace. When you're reading a book, if it's an easy reading book, like a novel, for example, average reading pace is about 300 words a minute. If you're in a conversation on the phone or in a cafe having a chat with somebody and it's a general friendly face-to-face conversation with somebody that you know well, this is about 200 words per minute. The recommended speaking pace for a public speaker delivering a presentation is between 120 and 150 words a minute. That's nearly half the speed of your day-to-day conversations on the phone and much slower than you would read. And that becomes very interesting because you've got to let people absorb the message, and people absorb at different rates. But if you've got a room where there are slight noises and distractions and people have different rates of absorption, you've got to be able to get in there and really connect with everyone. And pace is a massive key to that. I once went to a training seminar that was an hour and a half long, and the person that was delivering the session had 131 slides. They had to get through 131 slides in 90 minutes. I mean, you work that out as a number of slides per minute. It was staggering. And some of the information on the slides was in paragraphs, and it was size 12 font. So she's trying to read through these slides and get through them and click next. I didn't have time to absorb a slide, and she was 5 slides off. And she eventually got to a point about 70 slides in where she went, oh, I'll go to some at the end. And she must have skipped over about 20, 30 slides. I'm thinking, know your audience, man. Know what they can take. I wasn't going to get 130 slides in 90 minutes. It wasn't going to happen. So think about, how long have I got? What size is the room? What are people's attention levels like? How are they going to learn? And think about, what can they reasonably absorb? They're probably going to absorb more from you than from the slide, which is one of the reasons I've just put pictures and one word on a slide, because I want to engage with you. I want you to have something to think about from the slide, but I don't want to just read it. That's boring. And I haven't got 130, that's for sure. So think about your audience and think about what they can reasonably manage. I'm not playing party politics here, but something I've noticed interestingly recently is Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party. He speaks, on average, a speechwriter commented on this recently, between 90 and 120 words a minute in the House of Commons. So he's very slow when he speaks in public. but you don't miss a word. It's very deliberate and it's very intentional, everything that he says. And I'm not saying he's a perfect speaker, and I'm not saying I agree with everything he says, but the way that he goes about speaking is very deliberate and very measured, and it's considerably slower than you would think otherwise. And again, this is another one where nerves comes into it. If you're nervous, you've got to really think about, okay, what can I do here to again manage the breathing, but slow down that speaking pace to 120 to 150 words a minute, or slower than I would normally do when I'm speaking to one person or in a social setting. Here we go then, next question. Ready? Fastest fingers. Go. Lots of competitive, intent faces. This is game day for some people. They're enjoying this.
Oh, yes.
All right, let's skip out and see where we are. Lots of B's, very good. Again, Marcus, Carl, Julian at the top. Amazing, yeah. So Keir Starmer was 90 to 120, but the average for us, generally speaking, is 120 to 150. So B, correct answer on that one. Well done, everybody. Excellent. Pause. Have you ever wondered why silence is golden but duct tape is silver? Just thought I'd raise that one. We live in a very impatient world. A world that demands instant, whether it's downloads, fast food. The world is a very impatient place, and sometimes we don't want to wait. Sometimes we don't want to be willing to take that time to pause, to consider, and to reflect. The average time in a classroom between a teacher posing a question and demanding an answer from students is 1.7 seconds. Now, if you're teaching a class and you've just asked a really meaningful question, what kind of answer do you really think you're going to get to that question after 1.7 seconds of thinking time? You know, that's almost like saying, having read this extract of A Christmas Carol, how would you evaluate the character of Scrooge in this paragraph? Simon, what do you think about that? I haven't even had time to think about the paragraph we've read. I haven't even had time to look back over it. 5 to 7 to 10 seconds, much more appropriate of a gap. And there are lots of reasons why we don't leave that time. Perhaps it's nerves. Perhaps in a classroom makes you feel like people will misbehave if you fall silent and you don't speak for a few seconds. Again, apprehension, feeling like people might not trust you. You might lose credibility if you pause and it looks like you don't know what to say. But actually being in control of the environment and being courageous enough to say, this is a meaningful question, and I want you to take some time to think about it before I ask you for an answer. If you preempt the question and you say to people beforehand, I'm going to pause for a minute because I want you to think about this, then that sets you up nicely, and people are more likely to respect the silence and the time if you've asked something particularly meaningful. The challenge, obviously, is that communication, particularly through smartphone and technology, is now constant. It's rapid, it's relentless, and we can send communication without a second thought. And because of that instant demand all the time to be able to think, oh, I'll just send someone a message, bang, it's gone. To be able to sometimes take that time before we speak or before we ask a question is no longer second nature. It takes restraint to hold back and wait for that amount of time. But it's sometimes the most powerful part of a speech. I have to say that the most influential presentations I've heard that have had significant impacts on my life have come when people were willing to let me sit in silence. And I got more sometimes from those moments of silence than I did from when they were speaking. And that's no insult to the speaker. In fact, it's a compliment to them because they were willing to be courageous enough to hand over to us and say, take that time, put it into practice and think about it. I hope you don't mind me shouting out to you here, Marcus, and giving you a compliment. But when you delivered that workshop at the conference last year on Barack Obama and rhetoric, that 10 minutes where you gave us that time to sit and say, do your 60-second speech about Toastmasters and do it in the style of Barack Obama, I do not exaggerate when I tell you that those 10 minutes have transformed my speaking career to the point where I now coach people on points that you taught me. And I think that's the biggest compliment I could pay you as a speaker, when I say that you taught me more in those 10 minutes than you would have done in the whole hour and a half that you were speaking, because you gave me the principles and you let them govern themselves and you set me off on it. So can I have this opportunity to just thank you for that?
Oh,
Yeah, well done.
thank you very much. Yeah, that means a lot. And I think I was merely a tour guide, but I completely, yeah, you've got to give people the time straight after the learning just to reflect and try and get something from it. But I'm so glad that was helpful.
Oh, thank you. And it was the pause. It was the pause that did it. So have that courage to say to people, I'm going to give you some time to think about it and I'll come back to you. And give people that processing time. Absolutely essential. The next one is a question. Average time for a teacher between posing a question and demanding an answer is... Last his fingers. Let's go. Oh, and there's a spelling mistake, unless it's Spanish, seconda. I don't know. Sorry, guys. English teacher can't spell. How embarrassing. All right, let's see what we got. Chat box coming up. Yes, we are unanimous on D. Very good, everybody. Fantastic. Yeah, 1.7 seconds. Tragic, that, for a classroom. Take that 5 to 7. Parlance, moving towards the latter stages now of the 10 Ps. Parlance, meaning language, meaning the words that we use, the language that we put together when we are delivering a speech. This comes to knowing your audience, really. And if your audience is a specialist audience and they have familiarity with the vernacular that you might use, so legal terms or medical terms or educational terms, then that's fine. There's no problem with that because they'll be familiar with the language you're using. But if you start throwing out acronyms and throwing out phrases and words to show off your knowledge or to show off your knowledge of the dictionary and the thesaurus, you're more likely to frustrate and alienate your audience rather than embrace them and bring them in. I've always found that simplicity and clarity of language is the key to winning people over. I once heard a quote, and I've got it down here, by an American writer called John Taylor. And John Taylor, a long time ago in the 1800s, said this: it's true intelligence for someone to take a subject that is mysterious and great in itself and to unfold it and simplify it so that a child could understand. And being a teacher, I think that really resonates with me about unfolding it for people to understand. You know, I know all about literature terms because I've studied them for 7 years. I've studied books. I've studied A Christmas Carol because I have to teach it every year. And I can tell you all about avarice and misanthropy and Christian charity. But if you get a group of children in front of you that can't speak English, you've got to be able to say, Scrooge was a bad man. Why was Scrooge a bad man? What did he do? Yes, he wasn't very nice to his nephew. And you've got to be able to adapt your language to the people that you're speaking. As much as you want to talk to them about avarice and Christian charity, it doesn't matter to them. It just matters that they understand the themes of the book. In a similar way, are you sometimes in your presentations trying to teach people about avarice and Christian charity when they've never read A Christmas Carol? You've got to start to think about the audience that you're delivering to and if they understand the language. But if you're in any way uncertain, my recommendation from experience that's gone badly would be to say simplicity and clarity is always the way forward. It's better to do too simple and have to upgrade later than it is to go too complicated and lose half your audience during your presentation. So think about the language that we're using when we deliver our presentations. Number 9 is practice. And there's no escape from this. I'm sorry, it had to be in here. You have to learn by experience. And I'm so glad so many people at the start were talking about learning by doing and sometimes by failing and getting it wrong. Practice is a huge key to everything that we do. Whether it's playing the wrong note on a piano and learning how to play the piece, whether it's kicking the football 10 yards wide and having to learn to find the top corner, whether it's getting out of breath on a run and learning how to improve your form or your cadence to run better next time. It doesn't matter. Any discipline we learn by experience. And anybody that's great at anything becomes such by practice. J.K. Rowling, author of the Harry Potter books, has a quote that I absolutely adore. And she says, you go through life and you fail at something. It's impossible to get through life without failing at something unless you live so cautiously so as not to try anything at all, in which case you fail by default. And I think that's an amazing phrase. You've got to learn by doing and sometimes by getting it wrong. Michael Jordan said, I've missed over 3,000 shots in my career, and on over 20 occasions I was trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. And he said, I miss time and time and time again, and that is why I succeed. And so everybody that was ever great at anything became so by practice. And you can't get out of public speaking, unfortunately. At some point, you're going to have to talk to somebody, and you're going to have to learn by experience that, oh, maybe that didn't work that time. I had a conversation with somebody once where they said to me, I had an experience when I had to deliver a presentation in the office, and it didn't go as well as I wanted. So I took some time away from public speaking and didn't go back to it for a while. And I said, well, how long did you leave it? And he said, 12 years. You cannot wait 12 years. Sometimes we suffer setbacks. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it stings and we have to get over it. But don't take 12 years. If you're thinking about leaving it 12 years, talk to me. I'll give you some experiences where I've got it wrong too. But we have to get back on the horse and we have to keep going. But practice, practice, practice. There is no shortcut to success, and you have to pay the price of progress, which sometimes is that painful growth of going through the practice phase. And the final one is to ponder. We have to sometimes give ourselves that time and space to reflect and to think on what we've just experienced. And whether that's the start of a new year where we sit and write New Year's goals and resolutions, I wouldn't recommend that's the only time we do it, but writing things down, externalizing, we call it in the education sector, writing something physically, typing it in a box, putting it somewhere visible is absolutely enormous. And it makes you at least twice as likely to do anything that you commit to do by writing something down. So yeah, if you found something difficult, write down what you found difficult. Write down what you're going to commit to do next time to do better. And you will find that by that habit of writing and externalizing, that you become more adept at improving and growing more quickly. So the 10 P's are there as follows. You've got preparation, punctuality, posture, projection, positioning, pace, pause, parlance, practice, and ponder. Those are the 10 P's of public speaking. I close this evening with some final questions. And I would like you, if you would be willing to do so and to be honest with me, to type in the chat box at some point this evening during the meeting, or perhaps to send me an email afterwards and I will put my email address in the chat box. But I want you to commit to something. And I want you to commit and write down and communicate with me at some stage soon before it fades away into the ether, the following 3 questions. I would like your answers to these either in the chat box this evening or by email at the time of your choosing. And I am willing to hold you accountable. I'm willing to be an accountability partner to anybody that wants to grow. Your 3 questions are as follows. Number 1, which of these 10 principles that we've covered this evening do you feel you most need to apply? Which of the 10 have you heard and thought, that's me, that's what I need to do next in my speaking journey? Any one of the 10, you take your choice. Second question is as follows. What action will you take to improve in this area? What are you going to do about it? It's good knowing that you need to do something. I know I need to go for a run. I haven't been in a long time. I know that, but what action am I going to take? Well, my wife told me this afternoon that she's getting up at 6 a.m. tomorrow to do a workout before I go to work. So that probably means I'm getting up at 6 a.m. to put my running shoes on. And I'll let you know how I get on. But that's the action I've got to take. If I don't do it, it's not going to improve. It's not going to happen. So what action will you take? One thing, even if it's one thing, what action are you going to take? And finally, when will you start? I want to pin you down to a time period. I'm not going to go through SMART goals because that's boring and but it's based in that theory. When? As soon as you put a time on it, it makes it so much more possible. And holding yourself accountable to a time and an action combined with writing it down makes you more likely. Communicating it to me also makes it more likely to happen. So I want you to grow. I want you to learn. I want you to improve. Those 3 questions hold the key to the next phase of your speaking journey. I would like to know from you the answers to those either in the chat box this evening or by email. can I thank you for the privilege of being with you this evening? I've loved the time. I've looked forward to it. And I look forward to hopefully more meetings like this where I can come and join you, should you wish for me to attend. And thank you for your attention and your engagement this evening. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your time.
Well done.
Thank you.
Simon, that was fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. I've written down it was the perfectly pitched, passionate, provoking presentation. So they're my P's for you. And of your first question, which of the 10 principles do I need? I've just written down all 10 because they were all fabulous.